What's up, everyone? My name is Monet Warren, and welcome to the Diary of a Single Woman. So today we are going to be covering part 3 of our series, Daddy Issues. Now, I know in part 2, I said that part 3 was going to be overcoming daddy issues, but I kind of tricked you. That's going to be part 4. So I wanted to do part 3, and I wanted to kind of cover the impact. So on part 2, we also covered the impacts, but I talked about and asked you all to think about the impact of daddy issues on your relationships overall. So that meant every relationship that you existed in, friendships, romantic relationships, relationships with your siblings and coworkers, any sort of relationship. But this part 3, the impact, I specifically want to focus on the impact that daddy issues can have in your romantic relationships with men, specifically romantic relationships, because I think that for a lot of us, or specifically for the women who kind of run to romantic relationships to complete them, I think that this is just a source of a lot of recreation and what is the word I'm looking for? Recreation and kind of like a reinforcement of some of the things that we learned from our daddy issues. So attacking how we behave in romantic relationships will really kind of speak to and drive home this point that I'm trying to make throughout the course of this series. So without further ado, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about how I existed in relationships as a result of my daddy issues. So one thing I used to do often is I would break up. And it was not necessarily, I would break up for 2 reasons. The most common reason why I would break up is because of my abandonment issues. I would break up and it would really be a threat of breaking up. Like, I would say that I'm gonna break up with you, and what I was really expecting, what I was longing to hear was you fighting for me or you begging for me to stay, because in my crazy, jacked up mind, that's what I equated to you love me and want to be with me, is that you fight for me when I'm acting crazy and breaking up with you over something trivial. The other part of the breakups was also stemmed from like my issues of rejection. Like, I experienced it, I received it, I saw it, and so when someone was doing something that I did not necessarily like or agree with, I didn't know how to remain in a relationship and actually work through those problems, because my parents had divorced, they both remarried and got divorced again. And so the way I grew up seeing love in relationships is that if it just don't work out, you can just, piece them out and get you a new one. And that both of those ways are such an unhealthy way to view love and an unhealthy way to exist in relationships. And that was me taking my daddy issues and then forcing someone else to experience those things. And so it wasn't fair for me or that other person, but as a result of my daddy issues, that was how I was existing in relationships. Another thing that I know that I did, so in part 1, when I talked about my timeline, and I talked about there was that time from early teens all the way until my late teens where I just wanted to make my dad happy. I wanted his approval. I wanted his validation. I wanted him to think that I was just the greatest daughter in the whole entire world. And I took that into my relationships. Like, I wanted my partner to approve of me and just to think that I was the best thing ever. And so if they told me, okay, you know what, my ex, she never cooked for me, I would make sure that I was cooking and doing all of this extra stuff. Everything that they told me their ex did not do, I made sure I did, because I needed to be the best. I needed you to feel like I was better than your ex. I needed your approval. And that definitely stemmed from the way I related to my father. I wanted him to approve of me so bad. And also considering the way, I sought validation and I sought your time, and I needed you to be present, and I needed you always to want me around. Anytime I met a man and he did not have good intentions, he was able to manipulate my feelings by meeting those needs. And let me tell you what I mean, because men, there are some men out there, not all men, I know that there are some amazing men out there, but there are some men who specifically prey on women who have these daddy issues and have these weaknesses. In the beginning, they will meet those needs, right? For the first 3 months, everything is lovely. You think that this is the one. He's showing you a bunch of attention. He is making all of these promises of long-term plans, taking you places and always wanting to be with you. And then a light flicks off and he just switches it completely. And I was hanging on to, or I would hang on to who the man was in the beginning and not even really allowing myself to come to terms with what he was doing in the present. Like, what I should have done was been like, okay, you have switched the script, and I don't know who this person is. This isn't what I signed up for, but thank you for your time. I'm gonna go my separate way, and then stay gone. But oftentimes I ended up in this back and forth because I would leave, they would come crawling back, begging, promising to change. And again, because I had those issues of rejection, and the way that I experienced love was by you proving that you wanted to be with me, I would take them back every single time, and it would be good for a little while, and then they would start acting up again, and it would just be this cycle. But the reason I stayed was because although they had all of these issues and they were doing all of these things that I did not appreciate, they did those initial things in the beginning of making me feel like I was wanted, validating me, making me feel as though I was valuable, even though they were doing a whole lot of other things that proved to me that they really did not believe that I was valuable. I just held on and I clinged to what they were doing in the beginning. And I think sometimes as women, we hang on when we really should let go. And until we take a minute and examine why have we stayed in these relationships, why have we put up with the things that we have put up with, then we continue to repeat that cycle. So if you know that you have these issues, like I knew that I was very codependent. I knew that I was depending on a relationship to define me, to make me feel valuable, to make me feel beautiful. And that is why I was like, okay, for a year, I'm not going to date. I am not going to be in a relationship, because I needed to starve that need, right? It's impossible for me to stop relying on a relationship for validation while I'm in a relationship. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna give myself a year. It's been over a year, but throughout that year, I devoted myself to God because I'm a believer. I also devoted that time to finding my identity through Christ and just figuring out more about who I was. And the need to be in a relationship began to decrease. And do I still want to be in a relationship? Absolutely. I've said this in a video previously. My desire is still to be married, but it's not something that I absolutely need and makes me put up with just any old thing, because that desire is not so strong. I've starved it out. I've taken this year, and this, let me tell you, I'm 31 and I started dating for real when I was about 21. And from 21 all the way until 30, I have been in one relationship after the other. I have not spent more than 4 months single. So the fact that I've been single for over a year, like to some people, they're like, you may be like, oh, I've been single for 2 years. But for me, this year and some change is like, I'm just so proud at the growth that I've experienced, and the fact that I no longer need to be in a relationship to feel valuable. I actually feel even more valuable, and it's easier for me to look at a man, recognize he's a sucker, and keep it moving, because I know my value, and I know that if I give me to you, you are not going to know how to handle it. Like, I was having a conversation with someone, and I told her, I was like, I recognize that by giving myself to this man, it's going to be like giving a Maserati, the car note of a Maserati, to someone who works for minimum wage. It's going to overwhelm you. Giving me to someone who they can't handle, like, I don't want to overwhelm you. I'm doing you a favor. You're not ready for this challenge, because I'm a woman who knows myself, and I know what I'm looking for, and I know my worth. When a woman knows what she's worth, oh my goodness, like, there is very little that she's going to, you can't just come to her with the okie doke. And so that's how I now look at myself. It's like, I don't want to overwhelm you, and I'm a challenge to someone who's not ready for the fight. I was watching and I hate to be quoting this show, but I was watching Being Mary Jane, and I remember the brother was telling Mary Jane, you know, for a man who's never had to work hard for anything, like, they're gonna see you and think that's just too much work, and that's going to be the case. Like, you are going to be too much work for most men, but you have got to be okay with that by starving out the need, by being by yourself and being okay with it. So that way you're not so quick to jump at a man who shows you attention or a man who fulfills some of those basic needs. You are going to be able to wait that thing out before you start developing feelings, to really see what that joker is about.